deer?
No, it was a wolf.
Are you sure when the Bobcat, the Bobcat's been running this week?
I think I know the difference in a
Oh,
wolf,
okay.
a
It was
coyote, and a
close
bobcat.
enough. Well, if it was
No,
close enough.
it was right there. But at first I thought coyote. First I thought, that thing is about 3 times the size, so I probably an hour. They said, oh yeah, there's been a report of a little male.
But there aren't
He
many wolves
is-
around here.
There's not a lot, but there's a lot when you just get over the border and they kick the males out this time of year. The young male, and he was huge.
Well, Bob next door was telling us, because we had, remember we were talking the other night, we haven't seen the Bobcat? Bob said the other night that he's hanging out down behind the other neighbor's house.
Really?
He's moved, yeah, and I go, why?
Just go out and say, here, kitty, kitty, and petty.
Yeah, okay. Throw the
And
dogs.
they call me, tell me how that goes.
We didn't really treat him.
No, we didn't feed him or anything. Maybe they're feeding him. We just didn't do,
Hey, you made a man.
apparently.
My neighbor lady,
But if we had
lived on
that trip,
Lincoln.
somebody would come to do my trip camera.
My neighbor lady thought she had a black and white cat visiting her back door, but she doesn't see well. She kept feeding it. But she thought it was the smelliest cat. It's like, it's a skunk, quit feeding that thing. I always wanted a skunk as a pet.
That's fine if you defuel them. Because they supposedly don't make bad beds.
No, and they're smart. But I went to a pet show in Atlanta where they sold them, and I didn't tell Allison that's what I was going for. But anyway, I met a redneck who was buying a male and a female descended skunk to breed them so that they wouldn't have to have surgery. He thought if he started breeding descended skunks, they would produce descended offspring. I went, you
That's not how it
do know that's not how that works.
Oh, okay.
And he said, I think it would. You're an idiot.
So
Sorry.
he doesn't know that.
Huh?
He's gonna find out the hard way.
He's gonna find out the hard way, but he gets a whole litter of these skunk kittens, and
And he gets them, and one of them gets upset at him.
Did you make everybody mad last week or what?
I made everybody mad. What did I talk about last week that got everybody so mad, Bob? Or is it the rain? Maybe it's because Bob called me out Sunday and they're mad at me.
Think about what you talking about last Wednesday?
Okay, chapter 4, 2 Corinthians. We're just doing one verse. Yay. I don't know, and mainly because I messed up my notes, so we are stuck on this verse or we're having chat time. So therefore, since we have this ministry, as we receive mercy, do not lose heart. Paul says this twice in this chapter. He says, do not lose heart. What's another way? How else would we say, do not lose heart?
Don't be discouraged.
Don't be discouraged. You've got a different translation. I know what you're doing.
I mean, it's not, it says do not lose heart.
I mean, if anybody that we see in that time period, the apostles, the disciples, Paul had probably more right to be discouraged than anybody. He spent more time in jail. His life was threatened. He was shipwrecked. He was poisoned. He was, all these things. That would be a little bit disheartening. And so Paul is telling the church in Corinth, just don't get frustrated with it. We'll do this a couple ways. Can we as a church body get discouraged as the preacher looks around an empty auditorium tonight? We can. Or when we invite people and they don't come. Or like somebody that was here a few minutes ago and says, I want to come to church. And you never see them again. We can lose heart. As we see things happening in the news like this week where there's a problem around the world and yet we're seeing killings in this country as a result of that. It's easy to lose heart. But Paul says we shouldn't. And so let's get the end to the beginning. What should prevent us from losing heart over setbacks or denials or all those things? What within us should say, we can't lose heart? We've got God's mercy. And the bottom line is, who are we most responsible for on our salvation? Us. Work out your salvation. So it's easy to get discouraged, but we shouldn't, because the bottom line is, and I'll pick on Julie, but if Julie quits coming and goes astray and all that, it's my responsibility to try and keep her from running away. But at the bottom line, it's her and God, not me. It doesn't affect my salvation unless I let it. I've known a lot of preachers that have let things happening in the congregations and let the disappointments pretty well destroy their salvation. I've seen others that destroyed it by thinking they were more important than they really were. Their church starts going crazy, and all of a sudden it's all about them. Like Bob alluded to the other week. The guy from Acapella that started his own called, I don't remember, but he started his own church, and it was really all about him and the music rather than the message. So anyway, we're going to look at some aspects of it. We're going to consider some signs when you're losing heart. We're going to see reasons we lose heart, and then we're going to see Paul's secret to not losing heart. I think I had some verses in here. Yeah. So Paul says in, where am I here? Some of the things he suffered, as I mentioned earlier. More labors, more imprisonment, beaten times without number, in danger of death. 5 times I received from the Jews 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times shipwrecked. A night and a day I spent in the deep. I've been on frequent journeys and dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my countrymen, dangers from the Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers on the sea, dangers among false brethren. I've been in labor and hardship through many sleepless nights and hunger and thirst, often without food and cold and exposure. And apart from such external things, there's a daily pressure on me for concern of all the churches. So who is weak without me being weak? Who is led into sin without my intense concern? We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not despairing. We are persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. So, Paul is listing all these things, and I will say this. Snuck up on me. I will say this about it. The reality is, if you're mission-minded, those things actually spur you on to more good works. In many times. The dangers, the hardships, at least for me, they always perk me up. It's my phone in my office somewhere. But as opposed to when nothing's happened. That's where I get discouraged. That's where I lose heart. Not from the dangers, but everybody's different a little bit.
Jeff, the other thing is, as all of us get older, sometimes we lose abilities we used to have. That can become disheartening if we let it. Just those little things that deal with life and what happens.
Mm-hmm. So, anyway, Galatians 6:9, let's not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we reap. So as long as we keep in mind that we will reap the benefit if we just hang on, if we persevere, if we don't give up. I got a little bit, and still the day's young, but lady across the street from us passed away today, and I saw him come in the corner, came to her body, and I saw the lady across the street, an older one, pointing towards me. And I think I know what the conversation was, because they're not churchy people, and it was like, what? He can do it. That's my fear. And because I hate those funerals. Why? I can't preach them into heaven. I can't funeral them into heaven, and it bothers me. Because I can give them some comfort, but not much. Not much. And me, I'll get them and say, what do you expect? She's 97. And then leave. That'll be my funeral. Give me $100. No. I'm joking. Anyway. So, in Luke 18:1, if one of the ways or signs that we lose heart is we stop praying. He was telling a parable showing at all times how to pray and not lose heart. It is easy to lose prayer as one of the first symptoms that we're giving up. Now, pick on myself for a minute here again. I tend to forget to pray when things are going along smoothly. It slips my mind. When somebody's sick, I pray. When something's bad and I can't figure out how to do it myself, I start praying. The reality is, we should pray at all times, if for no other reason, is to stay in the habit. If for no other reason, now I'm saying there are other reasons. I told you a story about Kenny Perry telling me once that he would go to the range and hit golf balls every day of the year. Even Christmas morning, he'd go out 3 or 4 in the morning, turn on the lights, do it before his kids woke up, because he said it's the only way. He was the longest driving player on the PGA for like 15 years. And he said, this is what keeps me hitting the ball so hard. No matter what, and he can take a day off. It wasn't going to hurt him. But it was staying in that habit. We need to stay in that habit of talking to God. Jesus did. In fact, Jesus set a scene to talk to God, right? What scene did he try and set?
Lord's Prayer.
Huh? No, that was his how-to guideline. I'm saying setting a scene to have successful prayer. What did Jesus do when he wanted to talk to God and be refreshed?
Not by himself.
Went off by himself, found a quiet place up in the mountain. The Bible tells us, find a closet. And it's not a literal closet, but it's a place of peace and quiet. That is the concept behind the prayer shawl. If you've seen our Messianic Christian that comes, a Messianic Jew that comes to worship, and you'll see he wears the thing. The yarmulke is a sign of submission under God. The shawl that they wear around is their way of putting it over their head and finding peace in a dark corner to be alone with God. We're in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Although that's not what it says up on the screen. Anyway, so our prayer life. In fact, in contrast, we see many times that your prayer life is the sign of a good, strong Christian. For example, Ephesians 6:18, with all prayer and petition, pray at all times. Now, you mentioned the Lord's Prayer. You are correct. The Lord's Prayer was Jesus' example of if you're going to pray. And as the young men here know, and as the boys, when they say how to pray, we go right to that. And Jesus said he started out with an address to who he's talking to. He moved from there to a period of praise and thank yous. Then he went to what do we need. Then he went to protection. And then he went back to thank you. And then he ended it. I may have something out of order there. Don't be thinking too hard about that. But that's the basic route that Jesus did. But do we have to be so formal in our prayer all the time? Thank goodness no, right? How do we
I think
Can't think
Paul
of what that
actually
one
says, isn't Paul say in 2 Corinthians at some point that don't be rote in your prayers?
Yeah,
Don't follow the same thing all the time. I mean, it takes away the meaning of your prayer. So, that is 100% don't repeat the same prayer over and over again. But at the same time, I think that also goes to don't feel like you have to give me praise when you're calling on me for help every time, or when you're calling on me for praise, don't feel like you have to ask me for help, or whatever, There's
Let's have
several
some
reasons.
examples.
Yeah,
of 18 Hail Marys.
yeah.
Does it mean anything if you are just repeating the same phrase over and over again? We're to communicate with God as if he were our earthly father. And I didn't have a rote description of when I called my dad when he was still alive I didn't say, Father, how grateful I am to be your son. Thou art a great father. Now, tell me how to deal with this. No, but I did address him.
Xander and Zeke,
Huh?
the twins, and Xander and Zeke all know the prayer for God's great, God's good, let us thank him for his food, and they all say that together. Every once in a while, Xander does a different prayer, and he'll actually say a real prayer, and it's just, because he's finally getting to an age where it's like, oh, I've got other things to say. And so,
Is there anything wrong with teaching
No.
our children a rote prayer? No, because it's teaching them the basic formula of prayer and when and how. Patty?
Well, we were talking, I think, and we were talking the other night, you and, like, we were talking about it, it's like, there is that time where the formality of, and I have it, where there are certain times where I have prayers that I just want to say, and I get them, you know, it's like, this is what I've got to do. But that pray without ceasing is a constant thing, it's looking at the, as you're driving at the trees against the background, it's all of those things. And that is still prayer. We don't have to always be asking for something to have it in prayer. And, you know, and that's, if we didn't, otherwise I'd be.
Fiona and Declan, I did that today. We were driving and there was the most beautiful orange maple. And I said, isn't God amazing? Look at that tree. We need to be thankful for those things. So that in and of itself was a prayer source because I was saying we need to thank God for that. Yeah, I am much better at that continual prayer as I'm driving along, especially when I'm driving because I'm ADHD and I get bored. So because I'm in the car, it is quiet, I'm alone, and that is a good time for me to go through my mental list of members and their problems or people that aren't here and stuff. So, yeah, we also have that we're to devote ourselves and stay alert in it. What does he mean by keeping alert in our prayers? Well, especially when you add it together, keeping alert with Thanksgiving, with an attitude of Thanksgiving. Goes back to the orange maple tree.
Be aware what he's giving you.
Be aware of the things he's given us. I mean, if you think about it, now Alice and I, you know, boy, when we were newlyweds and in the Army, and I was making $1,500 a month before taxes and insurance, you know, whatever, there wasn't a lot of money left. And we were poor. And we were just eating whatever we could. Tuna noodle casserole. Y'all heard me say how much I hated that because that's what we ate because that was the cheapest thing we could. I used to until it was 7 days a week. But we were poor, but we were always thankful because we had a church family in Germany that was so incredible. And then we had the preacher and his wife were so good to feed all of us young couples every weekend. And she was an amazing chef. I mean, a real professional chef. And she would make all this food and we would just. It had to be expensive for them, you know, because it'd be 10 of us, 15 of us every Saturday. So I was always thankful for that church family, thankful for it. I was still thankful for the tuna noodle casserole even when I was sick of it because we could have done without. So even when we're poor, even when we're doing that, I mean, I think about the people in Gaza right now, there's no food left. They're not finding food. And there's only a little bit of water. But I heard a lady saying, I'm just so thankful they did turn on that one water source back on. Yeah, you find things to be thankful for. Yes, sir.
Earlier you made a comment about praying in between when you actually need help to stay in the habit of praying about it. But at the same time, I think that if you truly don't have anything to ask God for, then having an attitude of Thanksgiving would say that you should be saying prayers of Thanksgiving. Thank you for not having to have to, you know, my life is going swimmingly right now. You know, thanks for that.
So the basic Jewish prayer, Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech haolam. It starts out, thank you to the God, creator of all things, the creator of bread. And there's also a version of that that says creator of bread and wine. It's a basic, thank you God because you created the bread that we're going to eat. So, you know, that thing, when you have nothing to ask, you don't have to ask for something because it's like, man, I'm praying, so I need to find something that I got to ask God for. You know, you don't have to do that. It can just be a prayer of thanksgiving. Let's shock God occasionally and say, I don't want anything today, Lord. Just want to say thank you for letting me be your child. You know, and God has to love that as much as I got a text message from my mother earlier this week. And it said, don't have to call me. I'm kind of busy right now because I always call her on Mondays. And she said, but I just want to say happy Sunday. And I went back and I said, what do you mean Sunday? And she said, well, it's not a real thing, but I'm just happy that you're my son. Well, that felt really good. So if you think, if we go to God and say, thank you for being my father,
Did Mike get
I'm not
that?
asking for anything today.
Did Mike get that too?
No, he didn't. I asked him. And my sister, she didn't get it either, so it's
Well,
okay.
Daughter's Day was last week.
But she was watching me online.
Uh-huh.
Yes, sir.
Well, you know, if we look at when Christ was about to raise Lazarus, he says, "Thank you to God for hearing me. I knew that you always hear me." You know, just the fact that he knew that God heard him. You know, sometimes we all get frustrated and we don't feel like we're being heard. And yet Christ knew that God was not giving him that. He was listening to him.
Well, let me ask this question. This may turn into just a whole class on prayer, I guess, but since we're on that, when does God say he does not hear our prayers?
We're in sin.
When we're in sin, when we're out of relationship. We're not talking about, I sin today, therefore God can't hear me. We're talking about when I am living in sin as my style, lifestyle, as it were. But does that mean God never hears our prayer?
He hears a prayer of help me get out of this sin.
Okay, so help me change.
But I mean, I know what you're getting at, but I would argue that no, it's a deaf ear.
Hmm?
I think he does. It doesn't necessarily turn a deaf ear, but I think there is a certain amount of that he doesn't hear the prayer. I think it'd be painful for him.
But I think if God, like you say, you know, your kids are screaming.
Mhm.
I've been told to quit saying he has 100 kids, but anyway, you know, when your kids are screaming and it's play screaming, we tend to try and tune that out. But if one of them, the pitch changes to be a hurt scream, we hear that instantly, right? So I think the same with God. If you're throwing up prayers to get me out of trouble, but I'm not going to change, Lord, he tunes it out. But if he says either, I think they're trying to change, or if I intervene in this, they will change, he hears that. Ron, did you have something?
Yeah, I was gonna say that, if we say God never hears us when we're living in, I mean, it can't be possible because there has to be some time that you, which is what you're saying basically, that you get through so that he's willing to work with you.
Yes.
You know, we realize there are times when he won't, and really it's our fault because we don't change it. But there has to be a way for us to be able to come back.
And prayer life is a privilege too. I mean, it
Right,
really is a
just say it
privilege
now.
to have.
Just say it.
So if we look at it as a privilege, that we value as a privilege, you know, and I think that's important. I think you can't get away from that even, be guilty of things.
As a parent, sometimes we get super frustrated with our children, and we say, I'm never going to do this for you again here at the house next. But we really don't mean that. We really mean, just act right. How?
Well, we see as Cornelius was praying, and God said to Peter, his prayers have come up before me, go teach. You know, so we know that if there is a prayer for a road, that God heard it. We know that we have an example of God hearing that prayer from Cornelius.
One of the scriptures I read Sunday was God threatened Israel with divorce. Yet God heard them every time they would say, we're in the bottom of this pit, we need help. God heard them and tried. They sometimes didn't accept his help, which is not God's fault. Robert.
I was gonna say, I by no means am God.
Thank you.
Today, and
Really, we were wondering.
Anyway, keep going.
anyways,
I'm going to
today
get down on the announcement section. Bob said
today-
he's not God.
we were talking about letting kids go on field trips, and I felt like I was an awful person because all of these empathetic teachers were saying, but this could be the field trip that changes their life. And I kept on saying, you have to have a bar, and you have to have a bar that says this, because if that kid goes out into the community with us and causes an issue, that's the image Freeport High School is going to have on that. And I say this because that's a very human, we have to set that. I don't care how empathetic you are, you could screw it up going if we chose to go to tour TriStar medals and a kid caused an issue, they may never let any of our kids ever back in again. So it's important that we have that. And I was talking about this, and all the other teachers, but this could be the one field trip. And I feel like that's a privilege that God has, because He sees our heart, and He does know this is the prayer that this is the time I can intervene in his life, and it's going to make the world a difference. Whereas the human, we don't necessarily see that, so we're supposed to be able to say all that crap. But
Well, it'd be kind of like Josh, if he let every kid that says they want to play soccer play, the school never wins. But if he puts that kid and says practice, and eventually they get it all better, he rewards them with letting them play, then they and others say there is a standard. We have to try and live to that standard. And we have to try and meet that. One of my favorite, I had in about 84, we were doing what was called, then it was called Wintex, and it was all UN troops would come together in Germany in the middle of winter when the snow was the worst, and we would live out there for 2-3 weeks. Anyway, we had a bunch of soldiers of a National Guard unit come over to Germany to participate, and they were warned before they came. Terrorism is a real thing in Europe. They don't play. So when you get off the plane, no jokes, no messing around, no wisecracks. And so I met them at the gate, and I reiterated, I know you've been warned, but when we walk through this airport, German Polizei are not American police. They will take a billy club to your head if they think you're playing. And I said, you represent the government. We walked through, one kid's got his little short umbrella, and there's the Polizei they had these places where they would watch the airport, because terrorism was really bad right then. He takes his gun and goes like that, or his umbrella, like a gun. Well, they all came up with their submachine guns. I grabbed him and I threw him to the floor, put a knee in the middle of his back, and I said, I got this. And we had the MPs who were with us handcuff him and drag him out of the airport. He spent the next 2 or 3 weeks, however long they were there, he did not see one sight. He spent his entire thing on barracks arrest. He was either in his bed or eating. That was it. Because there has to be a standard, and God has to give us a standard and say, I'm not playing about certain things. God says, you live to this standard, or in the end you'll die. Eternal death. You can't pick and choose. Now, that's not to say we're perfect. None of us are perfect. We sin. I know it's hard to believe, but I lose my temper occasionally. But in saying that, it's about our lifestyle. Is our lifestyle always pointing upwards to God? Or is our lifestyle pointing downward to, I'm going to do what I want to do, and someday I'll repent because, I don't want to go to hell. Do you have something?
I was going to say, the caveat to that statement is we don't get to know what's the important stuff and what's not the important stuff.
No, not our choice.
And it's not our choice, and it's not our, that's between that person and God. When I brought up in my class a couple weeks ago about the fact that clearly God gave the apostles the ability to see into people's hearts when they're installing churches. There's no possible way that they would have, if they just picked men out at random by what they were saying, that would have worked. Mm-hmm. And so I think that falls in that same category of God knows when that prayer finally turns from that having fun scream to painful screaming. And we don't necessarily see it or hear it or whatever.
I've always relied on the fact that God knows what we need before we know.
Mm-hmm.
Or He knows. He's always aware. He's aware. And we'll be ready.
Our prayers for anything are not necessary. You're right, God knows. But God wants us to say thank you. He wants us to say, because don't we want our children to hug us occasionally?
You want them to ask you, you want you still, even as adults, you want them to call on you when they need something. And it's the same thing.
Well, I told Casey, she said, you don't have to do this the other day. And I said, I don't have to do anything. But you're my daughter. I want to do this for you.
That's it.
Okay.
I literally just picked up Zeke, and last week, or yesterday, we were discussing what our schedule is for next 2 weeks because of the musical, and Kayla is going overnight to a conference. And I said, I'm gonna try to get my mom to make dinner for us that night, so I don't have to worry about it. And tonight, when I was saying to Mom, I'm not gonna pick up the kids till 5, her first thing in her mouth was, well, what are you doing for dinner? And I immediately said, I love you. I was planning on asking, and you've made it now feel much more comfortable in offering it to me. And it's just, you know, do I need to, like, I know that if I ask, she's gonna make, and as long as nothing else is happening. But at the same time, it's nice to have that go both ways, and I'm sure it's nice when I can say thank you for that, you know?
I walked up to Missy in the hallway and hugged her, and she hugged me back. You know, it feels good. It feels good to have someone reciprocate love, and that's what God wants. I've given you all this love, reciprocate it. Give it back to me. Okay, so Paul goes on to say, don't grow weary in doing good things. Because doing good can wear you out, right? It can make you tired. I was telling someone, we took the clothing to Forston today, and Doc, what's his last name? Reuter. Doc Reuter said he has now made 22 trips with clothing to Eastern Kentucky this year. He's going for 30 by the end of December. You know what? If you're working a full-time job and doing that and running a second business, that wear you out. But he says he's going to quit being a doctor this year, so he can do nothing but that. And he says it is tiring, but it's good. And I told him today, I want to go with you. I want to go down for one trip with you because that is a good thing. And those are my people. So, I want to go with you. Okay, so don't lose heart in it, because you will reap if you don't grow weary. I have to make up to my mother after making hillbilly jokes at church the other day. So anyway, also, while we have the opportunity, do good whenever you get the chance. So I ran into a guy at Cup Foods the other day. He's old order Amish, if you know what that is. I mean, that's the full, nothing but buttons and straw hat, everything. And I don't know where it came from because I didn't know we had any in Stevenson County, but
No buttons,
and I didn't see a horse.
no buttons.
Oh, pin. Oh, yeah, buttons. But anyway,
Oh, but it's medium order.
yeah, medium order. But anyway, he made a joke to me, and I kind of joked back. And he reached out and just put his hand on me and said, God bless you. He said, I can tell you're a good guy. From a 30-second, but he was taking opportunity to do good. And I was taking opportunity to return the good to him. So we need to look for those opportunities. Chris and I were talking about people over the years that we've impacted at Culver's back and forth, trying to build some relationship. Don't know if it's any good, but at least we were good to them, I know we've helped the community and our giveaways and all that. It's probably in the last 20 years, no telling how many young mothers we've helped with all those clothes and stuff like that. So, and Haiti, how many of our children in our orphanage have gone on to college and things because we took the effort. And then also think about how you can stimulate someone else to do good, to love and to do good deeds. I can't get the words out tonight. How do we stimulate others to do that? What's the very first thing we have to do to get someone else doing it? Without saying, Julie loves 2 good things.
Yeah.
Josh? Oh, what did he say? I wasn't listening. I was looking at you.
Said it. Be the example.
Be a good example, yes. Set the example.
Show them what's possible.
Show them what's possible.
Psychology says that if you have one person with energy in a room full of energy-less people, that eventually people start waking up and doing stuff. And so the same thing happens. If you're a pillar of the community, you are going to affect people around you they may not rise up to what you do, but they will rise up around you.
If you think about the motivational speakers and stuff, companies will bring in somebody to try and get you stirred up, and they never walk out to the podium. Hi. Your company's paying me $250,000 to teach you how to be a better self. They come out, all right, and all this, because they're trying to get you pumped up, because otherwise you're not going to listen. But if they get you excited and they get you going, then you'll listen. So think about it. So can you just think about, I'm going to be a good example and stimulate everyone, or does it have to be more focused?
I think it can be focused. I don't think it has to be.
Well, it doesn't have to be, but we all are different people with different needs. So, I mean, we have our basic needs. Okay, so Julie, if I were to say, find me a good book, what kind of book would you just, if I just left it there, what would you bring me?
The Bible.
I got plenty of other things.
He's got those. For you?
That's not a fair question, because she knows you.
Well, that's the point.
Like, if somebody went to the library that had no idea,
But that's the point. She knows me, and she would have a rough idea.
Yeah.
Probably military history, probably, outdoor stuff. She knows the things I like.
I like yours.
And that's the point. Get to know our children first and foremost. Get to know our elderly, secondly. Know what they like, what they don't. Spend time thinking about them and what their needs are. And that's how you can then get them to do good things for others, because you can focus your energy on that. You can focus what they need. So, just think about it. Consider means put some thought into it. Put some thought, and a lot of it, if you do put the thought into it, comes natural then after that. When he was younger, what was the one thought always in Xander's head? Dinosaur. We all know it. So it becomes second nature to say, that's what he's gonna, that's what he's gonna want. All right. So don't neglect opportunities, and do not forsake the assembling of ourselves together. One, you need that recharge from God. That's one of the reasons God made worship. He could have said, sit in your home and pray to me for an hour on either Sabbath if you're Jewish, or Sunday if you're Christian. He could say, do this. But he doesn't. He says, get together. And he has from the very beginning, all the way back to Abraham, be together. Because he knows we need to pump each other up. We need to be there for each other. So don't forsake it, because that also encourages one another. It lets you see. We can learn, we can see when one of us is in a bad mood. We can be together and learn that somebody's sick. I mean, that's why we have announcements, because we can then say, oh, somebody's sick, we need to do something about it. And he says, all the more as you see the day drawing near, but since we don't know when that day is, ipso facto, what? Since we don't know when that day is, what do?
Any time between now and then.
So that means do it now. Because you don't know. All right. And then Paul goes through, there's a number of verses here, but the reasons people lose heart, we'll just hit these quickly. One is tribulations or troubles. It's amazing to me the people that are really concerned about the Israel and Gaza thing, and could it spread into World War? Well, it is concerning. Those sort of things do bleed over, and we are seeing it bleed over. But at the same time, we're not in control of nothing. So don't let that hurt you. Now, if we get to the point where war breaks out here, we got to consider it. And to answer the question somebody asked me Sunday, do you think they'll call you back up? I'm 61 years old, and I haven't been in the Army for 20 years now. They're not calling me back up. They gave up on that after I was here 5 years. They called me all the time. They quit. They're not calling me now. I just said, and I get my walker and go into the recruiting station. Here for my uniform. 9/11, we actually did call up 60-year-olds. And we had them filing papers and typing and stuff for us because we were so short-handed. All right, but he also says, watch out for lawlessness. Let me get down to that one. Yeah. Because lawlessness is increased, people's love grows cold. So, lawlessness always happens. There's always problems out there. In fact, today, Christians lose heart because of lawlessness and the tribulation. But we just have to stand against it. Paul said, no matter what those things are, Paul wore them as a badge of honor. Look what I had to put up. And he gave God the glory for that, but he still was saying, if I can deal with this, so can you. If I can put up with this, so can you. And then some of the secrets. One, we have to appreciate the wonderful nature that God's given us in our ministry. For example, the old law was all about the letter of the law. But in 2 Corinthians 3:6, the new law is about the Spirit. The old law, it said, kills in the Old Testament. The new one gives life. The old one was glorious. In 7 through 11, chapter 3, it says, this is more glorious. The old law was a ministry of condemnation, but the new law is about righteousness. Ministry was veiled under the old, but now it says it's unveiled, 12 through 17. The old ministry hardened hearts because they didn't see the way out. But this one gives us liberty. The old law transformed one person, this one transforms everyone. So there's a lot. Then the last thing before the second buzzer goes off here is realize the power of Jesus when we're weak. So when we do lose heart for a short time, still remember that God's better than us. God's greater than us. And He's able to take it. If you get mad at God, you get mad at God for a minute. He can handle that. He's got big shoulders. But then remember, He's there for you. He wants you. He's wonderful. And so He makes us strong when we're weak. And Paul says, look at those things that are not seen. Glory that is to come. His ability to make the trouble we have light and easier. I mentioned this the other day again, but Bruce, we talked about one time when people were worried about the economy and things, and Bruce said, if everyone in Nelson Town is starving, as long as I have a big farm, and as long as I have cattle, the members of this church will never starve. And if we had to, we could all live out there. We could share and get shelter if we all started losing our houses. His thing was, God has blessed me so much, we don't have to fear the economy going terrible. We'll survive it. We don't have to fear what's happening overseas because God's in control. Yes, we can still die. Yes, there could be a terrorist bomb. I don't care. I don't care. God's in charge. We'll be fine. When we mess up and get in trouble, Marcus a little while ago said, I've done some bad things. Join the crowd. Join the crowd. A lot of us have done some, Bob's the only one that's perfect. But he's a teacher and he's good. So we have all got, see, he's leaving, I made fun of him. We all have a past, and that's the glory of God, because God says, I got it handled for you. All right, thanks. We will, for our visitor, we'll have a devotional. If you want to stay, you can. We'll sing a couple of songs, somebody gets some thoughts, and that'll be it. We'll just wait on the kids to come up from downstairs.